so you can watch later if you need to. So we've got a few people that put in the chat about the volume going down. We have not started the presentation yet, so you shouldn't be hearing anything. We'll start the presentation in about another minute or two, just giving some more people to sign on to the webinar before we start. Okay, we are going to get started. Thank you all for tuning into today's webinar on the State Route 89 Recreation Corridor Management Plan. Today on our webinar, we will have a small panel and two presenters. Myself talking right now, my name is Devin Middlebrook. I am the Sustainability Program Manager for the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. With us presenting as well will be Stephanie Grigsby with the Design Workshop. She's the project manager and lead consultant for this project. Also joining us and available for any questions you may have is Mike Gabor with the United States Forest Service, Michelle Glickert with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, and Danielle Hughes with the Tahoe Transportation District. Today's webinar is going to be from now until about 1:30. We may end earlier depending on whether or not the audience has questions. We'll be going over a presentation that gives you an overview of the corridor plan, what considerations we're taking, and we will be looking for community feedback. As you can see in your Zoom browser, there is a question answer chat room, and there's also a question and answer panel. So if you can please submit any comments or questions you have either to the chat or to the question and answer panel. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. So as you have them, type them in and we'll get to all of them or as many as we can at the end of the presentation. And then finally, we'll be following up with an email with a short survey and the video recording of this presentation if you want to view it again or share it with people who you think might be interested. So getting into what is corridor planning. So we're calling this the State Route 89 Recreation Corridor. In the Tahoe Basin, when we look at transportation planning as a whole, we have split the basin into distinct corridors. So these corridors are separated, as you can see on that map, sort of geographically, and each has distinct geographical characteristics as well as demand. As you know, the State Route 89 Recreation Corridor is a recreation corridor. It roughly starts just outside of the city of South Lake Tahoe at Westway in South Lake Tahoe and goes up to the Tahoma, up to Tahoma at the Placer County, El Dorado County line, just past Sugar Pine State Park. So along this, you have major recreation attractions as the Camp Rich, Pope Beach corridor, Emerald Bay, obviously, Rubicon Bay, Meeks Bay, and Sugar Pine, along with access to Desolation Wilderness, rock climbing, backcountry skiing in the winter, all sorts of activities, lake access. So there's a lot going on. Corridor planning began in the Tahoe Basin in 2013 with the State Route 28 corridor plan. That is, as you can see in the top right corner of the map, that's really Incline Village down through the East Shore beaches. In 2017, the Tahoe Transportation District completed the Corridor Connection Plan, which looked at all of these corridors and did a high-level analysis of visitation patterns, uses, and how many people are going in and out of these areas. And then in 2019, we kicked off and are currently working on the State Route 89 Recreation Corridor Plan, which we'll explain more today, and really looking at how we can better connect transportation and recreation. Just a few highlights to the 28 corridor. The corridor plans really take a bundled approach to implementing projects. So everyone is probably familiar by now with the famous Tahoe Trail that goes along the shores of Lake Tahoe, connecting Incline Village to Sand Harbor. That trail opened in June 2019, right at the end of June. Since its opening, it's already had over 220,000 users on that trail. But it was more than just a trail, and this is the benefit of the corridor planning process, is it was all about multiple benefit bundled projects. So there was parking management involved, there was safety improvements, there was water quality improvements. So not only is it a bike trail, it's protecting the environment, it's making people's recreation experience better and safer. So those are the sort of projects we're looking for on the West Shore, is how can we create multiple benefit projects that not only enhance the recreation experience, but also meet our other goals, which we'll explain in a few slides from now. This also included transit. So there's a transit shuttle, the East Shore Express, that goes from Incline Village to Sand Harbor. And I just wanted to highlight their success in ridership because of in combination with the bike path, parking management, and highway safety improvements. A lot of use has been able to be shifted to transit and bike, really alleviating a lot of the issues at Sand Harbor where people line up to park at 7 a.m. to get into the beach and backs up onto the highway. While there's still some of those issues on peak days, these management techniques and these alternate modes of travel to recreation sites have alleviated a lot of those issues. Many of those issues are similar that we see today on the West Shore. So you can see starting in 2016, they had just over 25,000 riders, with about 15,000 in that peak month of July. And then this last season, 2019, they serviced almost 40,000 riders and nearly 20,000 in July total. So this has been a very great successful pilot project operated by the Tahoe Transportation District, again, the East Shore Express. So getting to the 89 corridor and what our webinar is about today, why it's pretty obvious when you look at this picture and think about your experiences that you've had on the West Shore of why we're thinking about this. Obviously, in between Emerald Bay and the beautiful peaks of this shore, there's a lot of demand. People want to enjoy the recreation amenities. There's any recreation activity, almost any recreation activity you want to do, you can find on the West Shore. But that comes with its problems. That comes with people going there. And we all know what 4th of July through Emerald Bay looks like. It is crowded. There's people parked along the shoulders of the highways. There's people on the trailheads. There's litter and issues with that. And it can really impact the visitor experience and impact safety through this corridor. This is also a very familiar site with cars parked wherever they can. This van is clearly not parked where it should be parked. You can see through the middle that there's people walking in the middle of the highway. So really what we want to do from this corridor is deal with these issues. And it can really be summarized by the fact that demand has exceeded the infrastructure, the recreation infrastructure and transportation infrastructure for people in that corridor, and that's impacting visitor experience. Obviously, there's safety concerns. There's damage to the environment when cars, as you can see in this picture, are parked in the dirt. That causes fine sediment and stormwater erosion to get into the lake, which hurts lake clarity. And then there's the congestion and traffic that everyone is familiar with. So what are we doing? What are we planning? So this planning effort is a joint project between the United States Forest Service, Tahoe Transportation District, and Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, along with support of our great consultants at Design Workshop, LSC, Orca, Karen Mullen, and Farron Pierce. We also have involvement from many stakeholders, agencies, businesses, and individuals throughout the community. We really are relying at a high agency level for policy development and the direction to work on this plan. We are developing the plan with our project development team. Those logos, you can see a handful of those on the right of the screen, including El Dorado County, Placer County, nonprofits like the Tahoe Fund, businesses such as Camp Richardson Marina, and then also the Washoe Tribe, public safety, Highway Patrol, the fire districts, Caltrans. We've also been working with a number of stakeholders. So many of those that are on this call hopefully is not the first time that you've heard about this project and this plan. We've engaged many stakeholders through many different processes, including this today, and will continue to do so as we develop the plan. So talking about that, our progress to date, we've had 8 of our stakeholder group meetings. So those are members of the public. Those are homeowners associations, businesses, user groups, all of those people that use that corridor. We've had over 8 meetings to get input on this plan. We've had 5 meetings with all of our agency and business partners, that project development team logos you saw on the last slide. We've done 7 one-on-one meetings with businesses, agencies, and stakeholders that have land management or land ownership within the corridor. We've done 15 days of data collection out in the corridor. We did traffic counts, parking counts, did intercept surveys, did postcard surveys. So we've done extensive data collection in this corridor to understand how people move around the corridor and what they do and how they get there and how we can potentially put together projects and management strategies to better manage people. We've produced an existing conditions report, which summarizes all of this data, some of which I will highlight in this presentation, but is all available on our website at trpa.org/SR-89. We're completing a travel options analysis that we will cover today, so I won't go over that too much. And we've also secured funding to continue the work on the Tahoe Trail, which is the separated paved bike path that goes, shared use path that currently ends at Meeks Bay in the north and ends at Baldwin Beach, Spring Creek Road in the south. So looking at connecting that. So what are we trying to do? I've talked a lot about the issues we're trying to solve and how we're trying to solve them, but what are we trying to achieve in the future? We really want to provide a safe and seamless travel experience that inspires every visitor and resident to walk, bike, or use transit to access the corridor's diverse recreation offerings, to better manage congestion, enhance environmental resiliency, and allow people to focus on enjoying the special nature of Lake Tahoe's southwest shoreline. While that is the long, beautifully worded vision statement, really it is all about getting people out to the West Shore, enjoying the recreation amenities while reducing a lot of those pressure points we feel every day, like traffic and congestion, crowding, things like that. So really enhancing that visitor experience and preserving the environment. That brings us to our goals. So I'll start there, improving the environment. I mentioned stormwater runoff from cars parking on dirt and a lot of that erosion. There's also erosion at trailheads and loss of vegetation within Emerald Bay. Safety is obviously a big concern, not only of the safety of the people, not only for the safety of the people recreating in the corridor, but also for emergency vehicles trying to move through the corridor. We've heard from our public safety partners that it's very difficult for them to respond to emergency calls because of the traffic and because of the congestion. So we're able to, we want to enhance safety not only while you're recreating, but also enhance the access of public safety agencies, police and fire, to respond to events. We want to create a comprehensive transit and trail system. As I highlighted on the 28 corridor, the trail that now connects Incline Village to Sand Harbor and the East Shore Express, those all work together to provide a seamless visitor experience and be able to get you to recreation sites without the need of your personal vehicle. Obviously, the quality of experience for everyone is very important. We want people to enjoy recreating while they're out in Tahoe. And when we talk about visitors to this corridor, it's not just about tourists and visitors from out of town. It's also about locals. Locals visit the corridor. They go to the corridor and they recreate. So when we're talking about visitors in this context, we're really talking about everyone that uses this area and enjoys the outdoors along the West Shore. And then finally, it's very important to fund and implement the vision. Obviously, it's great to have as many plans as we want, but we also want to make sure that we do something with those plans and implement those plans. So we want to look towards funding and implementing. So now I'm going to open this up to our first poll of the webinar. So everyone should have a poll that popped up in their screen. And if you would like to vote, you can choose 2 of the 5 goals. So choose the 2 goals that you feel are most important for the corridor or yourself, and people are voting away. So we'll be able to see that. We'll give people a minute or 2 to vote. Okay, it looks like the votes have stopped trickling in. Not everyone has voted, but a majority have. So we will end the poll now. So as we can see, out of the 119 people who voted, 76% chose create trails and transit system. Clearly the front runner there as far as the audience today. And the rest of the goals, improve the environment, looks like second place, and travel experience and safety are tied. So thank you for answering that poll. We will have 2 more polls throughout the webinar. So we will, I can share it with you, and we will keep going from here. Is everyone able to see those results? I see someone in the chat said they did not. And that was that slide. So now looking, I mentioned that we had we did about 15 days of data collection in the corridor. So this was not only in-person, on-the-ground days, we also summarized a lot of the existing data that was still going on or that already existed for the corridor. I see one of the questions in the Q&A is what days the information were collected. So these were done in August of 2018 over a series of weekdays and weekends. So we tried to capture what would be considered an average summer day. So we looked at not only parking, traffic, active transportation, so that's bikes and pedestrians, what recreation activities people were doing, the visitor experience people were having, what were people enjoying, what were people not enjoying, who were they, where were they coming from, how long were they staying, what were their demographics, and what reason were they visiting. Again, not only what activity were they doing, but why did they come to that specific area. What we really found from the data was that within this corridor, there's really 5 distinct sub-corridor areas. Starting at the north, you have Sugar Pine Point. Then going south, you have Meeks Bay. So both of these areas, Sugar Pine Point is mainly state parks land. Meeks Bay is Forest Service area. Rubicon neighborhood is mainly residential areas. Emerald Bay, we all know Emerald Bay, but that also includes the DL Bliss segment, and then Pope to Baldwin. So looking in, again, what are people doing? How are they getting around? What are they doing when they're in this area? So here's just some highlights from our data collection on visitor and travel patterns. So you can see with who they are, we broke it down by residents, visitors, overnight visitor. That is a typo. That should be residents. Oh, sorry, residents and then visitors. And then within visitors, it's broken down to overnight visitors and day visitors. So overnight visitors obviously are those that are staying overnight in Tahoe. So you can see the vast majority of people that go to Pope Baldwin area and Emerald Bay are visitors. You get slightly more residents visiting Meeks Bay. And the overall corridor, you're at about 20% residents and 80% visitors, again, on an average summer day. And of those visitors, almost 90% of them are staying overnight in Tahoe. What should be no surprise to people if they've ever been through that corridor is that it is auto-dominated. Across the board, overall 86% of the visitors that visit this corridor visit by car. We do have some bike and some walking and a little bit of transit or other modes, but primarily it is by car, and that is definitely one of the reasons that we have so many issues with traffic and congestion, is because everyone is going there by their vehicle. So moving forward, what are they doing once they get there? You can see that one of the challenges that we have in the 89 corridor is there is a variety of different activities available. There's a lot of things people can do, from visiting the beach to going on a hike to backcountry skiing to doing overnight backpacking trip into Desolation Wilderness to simply driving around and taking that one selfie in Emerald Bay. And you can see by location that varies a lot, especially within Emerald Bay. Depending on what parking lot people are parking at, that visitation can really, that visitation pattern and activities really change. And this is something that is a big consideration for what we do and what projects and improvements happen on the ground, especially with transit. We need to know what people are doing and where they're going in order to serve their needs. And then finally, we can look at when and how people are getting there. So you can see that one of the things that's unique, interesting about this corridor is most of the people that come to the corridor from South Lake Tahoe return to South Lake Tahoe, and most people that come from the corridor from North Lake Tahoe return to North Lake Tahoe. So that means that people are coming and going from the same direction. So that means there's a high likelihood that transit would be, they'd be willing to take transit, the transit would work. But you can see that, as is no surprise to anyone, that the parking lots fill early. That's because they are really on a a first come, first served basis. So people have learned to get to the parking lots early if they want to get a parking spot. So our parking lots can fill as early as 9 a.m. And then that spills out and onto the highway, and you get people parking in all of their creative parking spots. Through our data collection, we showed that in Emerald Bay, there can be up to 500 cars parked along the roadside through Emerald Bay by noon. And that's where you start to get your environmental issues and your safety issues and traffic and congestions. And you can see that issue is similar in Pope to Baldwin and Meeks Bay, while not as significant. So then what are we doing and how are we looking at solutions? So we have the data, we know what people are doing, we know how they're getting around, we know where they're going. So what projects can we do to achieve our goals that I mentioned earlier? And we really want to look at this through a sustainable recreation framework and what we call the visitor experience cycle. So every visitor, and again, this is anyone that is going to this corridor, that they go through this cycle of anticipation when you're planning your trip, to arrival and orientation when you come to the corridor, when you first drive and you get out of South Lake Tahoe if you're coming into the corridor from there, and all of the buildings disappear and you're in the forest and you feel like you've arrived. What does that feel like? Obviously, the experience of while you're there, what you're doing, and then you go through your departure, when you leave, what you want to do, and when you leave, how you remember the trip and how they get you out. And then finally, that savor piece is when you go back and you post the pictures on Facebook and you share it with your friends and all of that. But what we look at is really a comprehensive network of solutions to look at sustainable recreation and transportation and their connection, and it includes all those things on the right. So we started this process by thinking of this framework and thinking about how we plan through this visitor experience. And what we've done, and as I said, we've had a lot of stakeholder engagement and meetings and data collection, and we heard a lot of really good ideas and potential solutions and projects for the corridor. So we took all of these ideas, tested them against the goals for what we want to achieve in the corridor, and we've bundled them, potential strategies and tools, into these buckets: transit and shuttle services, parking management and enforcement, technology systems and information access, active transportation, and infrastructure improvements. And a lot of these strategies are already in use in Tahoe or may not be in use in Tahoe. We've also looked at a lot of other areas where they've had similar challenges and worked through these issues. We went and visited Muir Woods, where they recently in 2018 established a parking reservation system and transit service. And we've really looked at how they did that system, and they've been able to better manage their visitor flow. And they've already, in the short 2 years that program has been in place, have seen great strides in the rehabilitation and recovery of native vegetation throughout their park. A lot of those things are also new things we'll be testing in Tahoe, but I'll let our next presenter get into those a little bit more. Before I transition to her, I do want to highlight that all of these strategies are interconnected. We can't just do parking management. We can't just do a shuttle. We really have to do everything together for them to truly work and make an impact that we want to see. You have to do parking management and trails and transit and infrastructure improvements as a bundled approach to really get the biggest benefit and the most bang for your buck. So I want to stop here, and I'll open up our second poll to the group to vote again on two of the strategies that you think are going to be the most important for the corridor. Okay, thank you all for voting. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. We had transit and shuttle services was the top result at 73%. Next was parking management and enforcement, then infrastructure improvements, active transportation, and then technology and information access. So thank you for completing that poll. And now at this moment, I am going to turn it over to Stephanie, and she's going to explain more about the approach we're taking to bundling projects and understanding our visitor alternatives a little bit better.
All right, thanks, Devin. So I'm going to talk, thanks everyone for joining today. I am going to talk a little bit more first about transit options. Through the polling information, it seems like, thanks for your input there, there's really support for thinking about how we might re-envision how people arrive to the corridor, specifically in those areas where we have a lot of visitation around Camp Richardson, Pope and Baldwin Beaches, and specifically Emerald Bay. And we all understand that there's a lot of resulting issues that are associated with that. Through the comments you've noted where there's concerns about how emergency responders can get through and how locals can get through as well when the roads are congested. So within our toolkit, one of the options that we have is to really think about how transit and shuttle services could reimagine how people arrive to these areas while not necessarily increasing the visitation, just really improving that overall experience. So we have a spectrum of opportunities that we've developed and are looking into and would like to get your feedback on. Within these alternatives, we're looking at how a shuttle service could be employed within the busy summer months to really, again, think about how people can arrive to their recreation destinations within the corridor. The spectrums really range from being auto dominant, where really everyone primarily arrives by personal vehicle, to on one end, to the other end, where it really thinks about a car-free experience, and that the majority of people are, when they're recreating in the corridor, they're arriving via transit. And throughout these alternatives, we're thinking about looking at the baseline from the information that was gathered for a busy summer day in 2018. So that's our baseline number in terms of thinking about planning for these transit alternatives. So on the auto dominant side, as my slide is taking a minute to move here, sorry. Devin, it looks like my slide is, oh, there it goes finally. Thanks for bearing with me there. So the first alternative that we're looking at, again, this is within that spectrum of what we can think about how people arrive on a summer day. The first is the auto dominant visitor, where the majority of people would arrive to Camp Richardson and Emerald Bay and some of the recreation areas primarily by their personal vehicle. When we think about those alternatives within this alternative, roadside parking would be restricted. So we'd be relocating that roadside use to off-highway parking lots. Through traffic would be allowed in this scenario and in all scenarios. And the support infrastructure that would be needed within this alternative would be, if we're relocating that parking from the roadside, relocating it to off-highway parking lots, the Tahoe Trail would be completed and improved within this corridor, linking up from Meeks Bay to Spring Creek. So that would allow for some active transportation for people to be able to arrive to these locations by bike. But primarily in this alternative, again, it would be about allowing for personal vehicle use throughout the corridor. The second alternative moves and transitions from thinking about a car-focused experience to one that in the busy summer months from Memorial Day to Labor Day that people are really planning ahead. So it's a split of people arriving between personal vehicles and then also transit. So in this alternative, we're imagining that 50% of the visitation would arrive via transit to these locations, and then approximately 45% would arrive by personal vehicle. So again, thinking about the infrastructure and improvements that would need to correspond with this alternative, we would be looking at the Tahoe Trail being improved and completed from Spring Creek through to Meeks Bay and through Rubicon. We would have some additional off-highway parking lots in Emerald Bay and in Camp Richardson to be able to accommodate relocating. Sorry, if there's slides jump through there, to be able to accommodate the existing demand of visitation. But really, again, really trying to think about how we can better enforce no roadside parking areas through those zones to be able to relieve the congestion and to allow for that emergency access to get through. And this alternative, the shuttle system would connect from the North Shore, so it would connect from Sugar Pine Point and have a series of intercept lots that people would stop from the north as they come down to Emerald Bay and return up. And then on the South Shore, we would have an intercept lot somewhere around the Y area that would connect up through the corridor to allow for people to arrive via transit. Those shuttle systems would also connect into the main transit line, so connecting to State Line and the bed bases there, and then also up to Tahoe City. The next alternative thinks about moving one more step forward in terms of how people arrive. Sorry, my slides are taking a bit to transition forward. To what we're referring to the savvy visitor. So in this scenario, again, visitors to their recreation areas would be planning ahead, but they'd also be thinking a little bit more thoughtfully about how transit can be part of how they reach their recreation destinations. So overall, we're looking at, in this scenario, about 65% of the visitation to Emerald Bay arriving via transit. Through traffic would still be allowed, and again, the roadside parking would be restricted and relocated to allow for improved traffic flow and congestion management. The Tahoe Trail would be completed, and several other improvements would also be implemented. In accordance and in coordination with those improvements and in this alternative, we would again have park and ride lots at Sugar Pine Point State Park and in South Lake Tahoe. It would need to be sized a little bit larger to be able to accommodate the movements of and the need to move 65% of the visitation to the recreation destinations, and then we would have a small parking lot increase in the Camp Richardson area to accommodate that use. The final alternative is a car-free visitor experience, really moving towards really re-envisioning how people experience the corridor. So again, thinking about that within the Emerald Bay area, the majority of people that visit the corridor would really arrive via transit. Again, in this alternative, through traffic would still be allowed. Roadside parking would be restricted in these locations and relocated to park and ride hubs at the exterior of the corridor. So again, at Sugar Pine Point, and then in the Y, and then connecting in with the transit system through State Line and in Tahoe City, really it reimagines that within Emerald Bay, those parking lots in the summer would not be used, but people would actually arrive to the corridor via transit and access their recreation destinations, and then still allow for the parking lots within the other recreations to be used as well. So in Camp Richardson and Meeks Bay, and in Sugar Pine and in Deal Bliss, those off-highway parking lots would be used. But within Emerald Bay, it's really reimagining that people would arrive primarily via transit through these areas. So this really talks about transit being used within the summer. For the winter, we would be talking about, again, trying to improve that winter access, specifically through Emerald Bay, to allow for more year-round access and through traffic through Emerald Bay, and then being able to have the parking lots open to be able to allow access to those winter recreation destinations, which we all know that we really enjoy during the winter time period. So we wanted to take another quick pause here and just get a little bit of feedback in terms of your feelings in terms of which travel alternative you really most support. Again, this is a spectrum and where we might move towards, from the auto-dominant visitor to the plan-ahead visitor, which is about a 50-50 split, to the savvy visitor, to a car-free experience, where the majority of people are arriving via transit. So we'll take a minute and let people respond to this poll that Devin brought up. What travel alternative do you most support, and which do you think we should be moving towards as we plan for the future for the Emerald Bay corridor?
And hey, Stephanie, we got a question just asking if you would mind introducing yourself and giving a little bit of your background. So while we're waiting on the poll, maybe you could do that.
Absolutely, thanks. So yes, I'm Stephanie Grigsby. I am a principal with Design Workshop. We're a landscape architecture, land planning firm in State Line, Nevada, and we do quite a bit of recreation planning along with resort tourism master planning and landscape architecture. I worked with a team on the State Route 28 corridor management plan, and alongside me and Design Workshop, we have a real, a great team of experts with Karen Mullen-Ely, who's on the call, I believe, who was really instrumental in developing this State Route 28 corridor management plan, along with the East Shore Bike Path, which if you haven't been able to get out and enjoy, make sure you do. We also have LSD Transportation Consultants, who was also involved with the 28 corridor management plan, and Farron Pierce, who's also a traffic transit consultant, who's really diving into thinking about what it means in terms of planning for transit and parking management along the corridor. And then our final team consultant is ORCA, who Devin mentioned. And ORCA is actually a group of engineers formerly from Disney, who really specialize in thinking about how people recreate and how they move through spaces. So when we think about really trying to have change, understanding how people act and what we might be able to reimagine, and how we might be able to provide new options to be able to improve the environment and to be able to achieve some of the other goals that we have for the corridor.
Great, thank you. And we are getting a bunch of questions from people in both the Q&A through the formal question and answer button, and also the chat. If you're putting questions in the chat, if you can try to put those in the Q&A module, that'll help us manage it better. But I will definitely get to the questions in either one, but that definitely helps us if you can do it in the Q&A part as well. I will end this poll and share the results. It seems with folks, the car-free visitor vision was the most popular with 45% of the vote. It kind of actually went in order of 1 to 4, as you see on the screen, with savvy visitor getting 30% of the vote. So folks are definitely interested in seeing more transit, more bicycle access, less vehicles through the corridor. So that's definitely similar to what we've heard from all of our agency partners and the stakeholders in our other groups, is people really want to see some bold change through this corridor and want to see us get away from the vehicles. So that would be our last poll for this webinar. So I will turn it back over to Stephanie to finish up, and then we can transition to the Q&A portion.
Great, and thanks for all of your great questions. It's exciting to see people support the car-free visitor idea. There's definitely a lot of trade-offs as we've been evaluating the capital costs to provide infrastructure to support these alternatives, and then also the operational costs, and just what that means in terms of the number of buses that we would need. But I think in terms of a vision for moving forward, thinking about how we can really think about people arriving in a different way, and not to increase the visitation overall, but to really improve the overall function of the experience, and then the congestion as well, managing that congestion. Sorry, again, it's taken a little bit of time for me to move through the slides. So as we mentioned, transit doesn't have success just all on its own. We really need to use it in conjunction with a number of other opportunities. So within the Polk to Baldwin segment, some of those additional projects that we'd be thinking about bundling with transit solutions, again, revolve around relocating and restricting the roadside parking, but also thinking about parking management strategies. There's a lot of great examples about how we can think about reservations, how we can think about congestion-based pricing to be able to improve the flow and function. Some of the studies that have occurred really show that the congestion, if you're traveling from South Shore up to Tahoe City on a busy summer day, the first place you hit is Polk Beach Road. As we know, we'll sit in traffic there for a bit before we have a little bit of a gap and move to the congestion that's associated with the pedestrian crossing and intersection at James Beach Road there. So Jameson Beach Road, sorry. So thinking about how we might think about new projects and improvements that can really help improve the traffic flow and really manage the congestion, improvements to some of the pedestrian and bike facilities. So if we were able to increase the ability for people to bike to these locations, the current bike trail is somewhat at capacity. So are there opportunities for cycle tracks or improvements to the bike facilities to improve and allow for more people to bike to their location as well? Thinking about transit-only lanes to, again, help people incentivize the use of transit to be able to get them out of their cars. And then the options to be able to, in the summer, have a recreation speed limit that really helps to manage that flow. Specifically, one of the areas that we looked at within this segment at Jameson Beach Road, as the slide takes a little bit of time to transition, we looked in depth at some of the crossing patterns there at the intersection. We did a study in 2018 to evaluate what would happen if we held pedestrians longer. And the findings were that if we held pedestrians for 30 seconds and then allowed them to move across, that the traffic flow capacity actually decreased by 5%. But if we held them for a full minute, then we actually had improved flow capacity. So that shows the opportunity to be able to actually, hold pedestrians for a bit and then allow them to cross, that we can see some improvements there. The other thing we wanted to understand was similar to the vehicular patterns, that for pedestrian patterns, where people are traveling to and where they're coming from. So as they cross the intersection, where their destination was and where they are coming from. So we could understand if we reorganize some of those land uses, would we see any improvements? And overall, the findings really here, the bullet at the bottom, that if we relocate some of those uses, specifically the ice cream shop and the bike rental shop, to the lakeside orientation, in conjunction with relocating or restricting the shoulder parking in this zone, we could really see some significant improvements in terms of reducing the number of pedestrians that are crossing the road, and thereby help to manage the traffic flow much better at this intersection. So those would be some of the recommendations that we would be moving forward with. Along Emerald Bay, again, some of the improvements here are really associated with thinking about how transit can really serve the area. Not to really increase the use, but to better manage our uses. Restricting the roadside parking, and really thinking about how we can improve technology and some of the tools that our enforcement officers have to be able to really enforce no roadside parking in this area. Again, it's that piece of being able to do things in tandem so that we can have the ability to actually implement these and see success. Some of the other options that we're looking at here are reservations, and then congestion and dynamic pricing. And then, really specifically in Emerald Bay, thinking about winter access and year-round access. So looking at some of the physical improvements to the road, potentially reducing one of the switchbacks to improve emergency vehicle access and transit access to this area, and then other opportunities to think about how we might be able to have year-round access through Emerald Bay as well. One of the important things within Emerald Bay is really, again, the idea about completing the West Shore Trail and the Tahoe Trail alignment. We understand that there's some challenges associated with that within the corridor, specifically around Emerald Bay, and then some of the other tighter areas in the corridor. So there's going to be, as a follow-up to the corridor management plan a more in-depth feasibility analysis to really dive into some of the engineering pieces of, for this piece of the Tahoe Trail along the west shore, to understand what those opportunities are and where the alignments could be. Moving to the north, within Rubicon Bay segment, the primary projects and opportunities here really are the finding the solution and the alignments for the Tahoe Trail to continue from Meeks Bay south to Emerald Bay. So what's represented on this map are a number of different potential corridor alignments to be studied. These would all be evaluated in much more rigor and detail as part of the feasibility analysis, along with engineering and mapping of the right-of-way and land ownership as well, to understand what the opportunities there are. In Meeks Bay, we'd be looking at, again, improving the bike and pedestrian facilities, trying to establish, again, a recreation speed limit in the summer to help slow people down as they're coming through this corridor, and there is a bit of pedestrian activity along the road as people are making their way to trailheads and then to the beach. The opportunity to complete the Tahoe Trail alignment, and then really within that evaluation of the Tahoe Trail, really minimizing and reducing any conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. So looking at opportunities for underpasses to be able to make those links and reduce the need for people to make a crossing at the roadside road grade alignment. And finally, in Sugar Pine Point, the opportunities here really revolve around establishing a corridor entry so that people really recognize that they've entered into the recreation corridor along the State Route 89. From the visitor experience cycle that Devin mentioned, this is really important in terms of thinking about changing visitor behavior and that they've entered into a new area. There's really a great opportunity to have a park and ride that's associated with some underused parking areas, so it's not we'd really be able to take advantage of some of the existing infrastructure and facilities and coordinate with the existing TART transit alignment there as well. So I think we'll move on to getting to your questions and answers. But just as a note, we'll be following up this presentation with a copy or a recording of the video and a short survey. We're currently working on the public draft of the corridor management plan, so we've been actively talking to people currently getting input, and that input would all be wrapped into a public document that will be released, and you would have additional opportunities for public comments within that comment period and future workshops and webinars, along with public comment opportunities when the plan goes forward to TRPA and TTD for public adoption. So with that, I will turn it back over to Devin.
I'll take it over from you, Stephanie, and that should say a 30-day public comment period on that. And hopefully, obviously the situation we're all dealing with currently has made timelines and schedules a little uncertain, but hoping to have that public draft out within the next couple of months. So that will be something that at this point, all the feedback we're getting on today's webinar is not too late and will all be incorporated into that draft plan, but definitely looking at probably doing another webinar on that draft plan so people can see what the final product looks like and give more detailed comments as well. So moving to there, we'll move into the Q&A portion. So I will be working through the question and answer panel and the chat. Again, if you have a question, put it in the question and answer panel over the chat. It's easier for me to get to, but I will go through both. Oops. The first question we had was, how do we get rid of car congestion at Emerald Bay? I think through the webinar, we showed that there's a lot of strategies we could use, especially promoting transit and parking management, reservation systems, to address how we reduce the number of vehicles going to Emerald Bay, and that will in turn reduce congestion. So we can move to the next one. The next question is, when will the actual work begin? Estimated completed date, and what areas will be impacted the most? So there's not, that's not as straightforward of an answer as just this is when everything will be done. A lot of these projects will be done in different phases depending on what funding is available and what priority they are. I know the United States Forest Service has some work planned within the Camp Rich Pope Beach corridor that's ready to start being worked on. They just need the funding for it. There's some other things and some of the bigger conceptual ideas and new ideas that this plan will propose that need to go through additional planning and additional analysis. So those will be further out. As an example, the State Route 28 corridor plan that was adopted in 2014, and the Tahoe Trail and all those improvements just opened in 2019. So that was about a 5-year process from plan adoption to completion for those portions. So that might give you a better idea of how long that may take, but it really depends on what parts. And so there's a lot of variability in there. The next question is, what HOA groups were involved in the stakeholder meetings? So we did extensive outreach to many of the homeowner associations within this corridor. We understand that, especially through the Rubicon and Meeks Bay area, that there's a lot of homeowners associations. So we did, I don't have the list of all of the homeowner associations we contacted at the beginning of this process pulled up right now. I'd be happy to share that and email that to the person that asked the question. But we did reach out to many of them, and I know like the Meeks Bay, several homeowners associations in Meeks Bay have been engaged in the process. Several homeowners associations in the Rubicon stretch have been engaged in the process. The Spring Creek neighborhood has been somewhat engaged in the process. While it's very, if you are on this call right now and you are part of a homeowners association in the corridor and your homeowners association does not have this info or is not aware of this, please email me at dmiddlebrook@trpa.org or reply to the email when I send out the video link and let me know. And we'd be happy to get you involved in the process. And that goes for anyone else if they have a community group that would like a presentation on this, to let me know and we can make that happen. The next question is about the Tahoe Trail and how we will move the Tahoe Trail through some of the Rubicon Bay neighborhoods that don't really have a lot of public land. As you saw on the map, we are looking at 3 or 4 potential alternatives. Most of those hug along the highway and the right-of-way, but one of those alternatives does kind of follow public lands up above the neighborhoods. Well, that one has more geographic concerns. We are definitely considerate and want to respect private property rights as much as possible. I think the Tahoe City Public Utility District in Placer County did a really good job on the trail from Tahoe City to Meeks Bay, which has a lot of those same constraints with private property right along the highway. And they definitely worked through a lot of partnerships, and it took them a lot of time, but they were able to secure the easements and work through people and the right of way through Caltrans to get that trail built. So looking at following their success for that. Next question, did you do any research on those who live in the corridor and need to get from South Lake Tahoe to go to church on Sundays and grocery stores, etc.? Yes, we do have data and information about the corridor, more permanent residents and seasonal homeowners. So we do know and have considered those concerns. One of the reasons we're really looking at that winter access and increasing the amount of days Emerald Bay can stay open is those concerns for people commuting, people getting to resources and public safety concerns as well. So the Rubicon, Meeks Bay homeowners through this corridor are definitely have been a consideration through this whole planning process. The next question is, why are they allowed to park along the side of the road? There was no parking for years along Highway 89. There's definitely parts of Highway 89 where there's no parking. There's also parts of Highway 89 where there is parking allowed on the side of the road. One of the challenges we have is with enforcement. The Sheriff's Department and Highway Patrol only have so many officers to go out and enforce parking. The CHP likes to tell the story at our meetings about how they will be out in Emerald Bay during the summer towing a vehicle, and as the tow truck pulls away with the vehicle, another visitor pulls into that parking spot and asks the cop if it is free and available. So it really comes down to an enforcement part, and that's where you need some more of those physical barriers, but also understand that during the shoulder season and during the winter season, that parking along the highway is needed for winter recreation access, especially for backcountry skiers. So we want to make sure that we're having adaptive parking management so we can reduce roadside parking and eliminate roadside parking during the summer, but open up some of those spots during the winter and shoulder seasons when they're needed for different types of recreation access. The next question is, why doesn't CHP give out sizable tickets to all visitors to Emerald Bay to discourage driving? Where is the enforcement? So one of the challenges that they addressed on State Route 28 and something that we need to address on the 89 corridor is ticket pricing. So right now, a ticket for illegal parking in Emerald Bay is $35 or $55, depending on who writes the ticket. That's not going to discourage anyone. On the 28 corridor, they did a visitor survey study, a willingness to pay study, and it showed that people were willing to pay parking tickets of up to $310. So that was something that they had to change. The Tahoe Transportation District, along with their partners on that project, had to work with the Nevada legislature and the Washoe County courts in order to increase that ticket price. So that is definitely something we are looking at with this plan, is increasing the price of tickets. So it actually discourages people, because right now that low price for the ticket does not discourage anyone. This question is, would the technology systems and information access include things like letting people know if parking spots are available ahead of time? Yes, absolutely. So we want to get as smart with our parking as we can. So people know before they go to the corridor if there's parking, if there's not parking, how much parking is available, where it's available. So all of that is part of that technology package that we talk about. We also want to make sure that it talks across the system. So the same app that you can reserve a parking spot at Emerald Bay on, you can reserve a parking spot at the East Shore Trail or at Sand Harbor. One of the challenges we're going to have with that technology in this corridor is there's no cell service through Emerald Bay and Rubicon and a lot of it. And those really do rely on communication. So we're looking at opportunities like when we build the bike trail, is that an opportunity to lay down fiber optics to run internet out to Emerald Bay and be able to hardwire in for those systems to work. This one is actually probably maybe more of a question for Mike if he wants to tune in, but the question is, have you considered removing concessions such as the refreshment truck from the Bayview Vista, and what other impacts do concessionaires have on turnover in the parking lots?
Sure, I can answer that, Devin. This is Mike Gabor from the Forest Service. I work in the engineering department there and have been part of the team for this Highway 89 corridor management plan. So yes, I believe for this summer we'll not have a refreshment truck at Bayview Vista Inspiration Point there, because we did notice that particular problem, and our concessionaire was working with us to say, hey, this is actually increasing the stay times and not really what was intended by that. So that was a pilot project that did show us that. As far as the kayak rentals, those are part of the state park. I'm not sure what their intent with that particular concession is, but we can certainly get that information to them so that they could see if there's something they want to address there.
Thanks, Mike. The next question is about, let me see, it's a little long. The question, this plan seems to be focused more on bringing more people into the area versus considering the existing community safe. How can you incorporate these safety issues into the plan? Our overall goal for this plan and the way this plan is being developed is not for the goal of bringing more people to Tahoe's West Shore and bringing more visitors. It really is about managing the visitation that we have, better managing what we are currently dealing with, not looking to rapidly expand anything. And the safety issues and residential concerns are definitely a strong consideration and equal weight to visitor concerns within the corridor plan. This question, where would new parking spaces in Emerald Bay be located exactly? Maybe I'll have Mike chime in a little bit on this, but really the new parking spaces in Emerald Bay, that really depends on the alternative, as Stephanie highlighted the four different mode alternatives. If we're looking at the transit only alternative, the car-free visitor, you don't necessarily need to add new parking spaces to Emerald Bay because everyone's going to be getting there by transit. But for each of those alternatives, we will be looking at parking. And Mike, could you maybe comment on the Bayview campground?
Sure. So we're looking at, depending on the alternative that we end up going with, as Devin said, it makes a big difference. So if it's car-free, we're not looking to add any parking in Emerald Bay. That would be opposite of what that particular alternative would be working towards. But if we were to be putting more parking in Emerald Bay, the main contender for location would be converting the current Bayview campground into a parking area. There's also other locations adjacent to that, to Emerald Bay, such as the existing snow park, or further out towards the end of the 4 lanes that we've looked at on the south side, Sugar Pine Point on the north side, and as far north as Tahoe City for the transit area, or the transit hub up there for parking. So there's a number of different places we're looking at depending on the alternative. And part of what's key is matching that up with transit and availability of that for people to park and ride on the transit to get through the corridor for visiting the corridor.
Thanks, Mike. So the next question, I'm wondering who will fund the proposed programs, taxpayers, recreation agencies, visitors, et cetera, question mark. So again, that question really depends on what part of the project you're talking about. There's a lot of federal and state grant programs. One that I'm thinking of is called the FLAP grant, or Federal Lands Access Program, that funds transportation projects for people to access federal lands. So I think it's going to be a mix of grants, local dollars, state dollars, some of the concessionaire agreements that folks like the Forest Service and state parks have allow the private businesses that are operating to invest in the infrastructure. And then maybe Danielle, if you're available, would you briefly mention One Tahoe and maybe how revenue fits in the bigger picture in Tahoe as a whole? You might still be on mute, Danielle. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, this is Danielle Hughes from the Tahoe Transportation District. And as Devin mentioned, there is an initiative going on right now called One Tahoe. There is a website, onetahoe.org, that you can take a look at. We've basically looked at 29 different revenue systems for the regional transportation program and funding solutions. We have a significant shortfall in the region for funding available for these transportation projects. And even with those different grants that are available, there are additional resources needed to do these solutions. So we're down to just a couple different versions of it. Basically a cordon pricing system that is similar to an entrance fee for Lake Tahoe, and it's focused on different scenarios for that revenue investment, including a visitor-based fee, a residence, more of a flat rate fee, and then a commuter fee. And that is really to make sure that the people using the system are really paying their fair share. We all know that, you know, it's a limited number of people that live here and the tax base is fairly low. So it's really kind of redistributing the cost of that. And we would be happy to answer any questions. There's also a lot of different information available in that TTD's website under our board agendas that have information. We're regularly speaking to this at our board meetings.
Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.
The next question is, how viable is car-free visiting without mandating no car parking near Emerald Bay? So the car-free visitation alternative would include the idea of no car parking in Emerald Bay during the summer, all transit. So just to clarify on that one as well, because the majority of the group did favor that one, there are, as Stephanie said, a lot of economic and budget considerations and capacity considerations with that. If you're trying to move that many people by bus over those switchbacks, one of the biggest constraints is we can only use the shorter 33-foot buses that only fit 22 passengers at a time. So it's going to be difficult to move. It's going to be difficult and costly to move that volume of people given the geographic constraints of that roadway. Question, what water transport options are being considered? So we are definitely looking at water transport issues and how to integrate that. And I'd also toss that one to Danielle to touch a little bit more on water transit.
So we are considering the water transit piece in here. However, there's a separate ferry program that we're looking to continue planning on for the whole entire basin, with a high-speed ferry from North Shore to South Shore, and then connections with water taxis. I think right now with this corridor plan, it's really trying to understand the numbers that we can reasonably transport by the roadways in buses, because it is somewhat limited because of the long, windy routes that you have there. You can't have people truly standing up in some of those routes, and we can only use certain size buses. So right now we're focused more on understanding that element and seeing if we could then redirect some of that to a waterborne system. I think there's a lot more connections that need to be tied in with that. So it's more of a regional issue than just this Emerald Bay corridor.
Thank you. The next question was, how does the car-free option work for a resident of the area that may go to either the north or south for groceries, etc.? Yes, so this is probably the biggest challenge we have with planning in the Tahoe Basin and within this corridor, is that a interstate highway goes through the corridor. We are not legally allowed to stop people. We can't put a gate. We can't turn people around. People are legally allowed to drive through there because it is a public highway. Unlike most national parks, Muir Woods, Zion, Yosemite, they have one way in, one way out, or a few limited ways in and out. And they have gates and ways to control that. That's going to be our biggest challenge. I think anyone that's driven around Tahoe in the summer has been stopped behind someone that pulls in the middle of the highway and reaches out their hands with a cell phone to take a picture. So we are definitely considering those implications, but residents would still, or people going through the area would still be able to get through. We wouldn't be restricting anyone from that. We legally can't. Multiple questions about the bike path. So I will just touch on that, the Tahoe Trail, and you saw those maps. There's really 3 or 4 high-level potential alternative routes. That's as far as this plan will take that process. It's not recommending choosing one or the other or really looking at a detailed analysis. It's really for visual purposes. We will be starting a new planning process here, the Forest Service, Tahoe Transportation District, and TRPA, and we're going to be doing a feasibility study for that trail. So that's when we'll actually get out with an engineering firm to go out and do slope and grade and soil measurements and really specific work and look for sensitive habitat and private property rights and start to map out those alternatives. So that is something that will begin this year. And if you are interested in that, stay tuned, because we'll have more opportunities for feedback and input from community members on what alignment that trail takes. How do we protect intercept lots for the 89 corridor users? So intercept lots would most likely come with a parking management system. We wouldn't just make them first come, first serve. So that is either a reservation system or congestion-based pricing. So we would definitely make sure, while you can't guarantee that the intercept lots are going to be used by people going to those specific destinations, the management systems we put in place will make it highly advantageous or discourage people that aren't using the lots for that purpose to park there. I see a question, what is the quote unquote recreation speed limit? So recreation speed limit is one item we have been looking at. In that corridor, when you just leave Camp Rich through all the way to Tahoma, the speed limit is 55 miles an hour. And that is during the summer, frankly, it's excessive speed for the amount of people that are in that corridor and walking along the highway. So in Nevada, the vehicle code allows for a recreation speed limit where you can lower speed limits through certain sections seasonally based on visitation, and similar to a school zone. So that designation currently does not exist in California. So we have identified the need to update the California Vehicle Code to recognize recreation speed limits to give us the ability, for example, around Meeks Bay during the busy season to reduce the speed limit there, or reduce the speed limit through Emerald Bay to enhance visitor safety. A question about how people can get more involved. So if you go to, I'll send out a link with this video recording to everyone that's on the webinar, where you can sign up for our e-alerts, e-updates. And if you are specifically a homeowner in the Rubicon, or anyone that is interested in the Tahoe Trail, I'll specifically put instructions on how you can get updates about progress on that. Stephanie, here's a question that maybe you could help with. What are the actual numbers of existing parking by segment?
I wouldn't be able to pull those off specifically, but we do have, we actually have numbers of the off-highway parking lots, and then as part of the data collection and as part of the annual data collection too that TRPA has been doing, they've been documenting what the roadside parking numbers are on those busy summer days. So again, we have the numbers for 2018 of both weekends and weekdays. So we have a peak average number for what that roadside parking number is, and then we have a peak of the peak number. What our design to model is currently as a baseline to understand is the peak average. So not the peak, but a peak average number in 2018 to base off of in terms of thinking about how we design a transit and parking management system. In terms of the parking numbers, we also had a LSC transportation consultant actually had in Emerald Bay people looking to see how long people were staying. So they identified people that were coming and just taking a quick picture and then moving on, and then people that were staying longer than 15 minutes, longer than 30 minutes, and longer than over an hour or over an hour and a half. So we have that turnover information to, again, help understand what the visitation levels are, and then what the opportunities are to shift some of that behavior to transit. People that stay longer obviously would be more likely to shift to transit than those that were just coming to take a quick picture.
Perfect. Yeah, and while you were talking, I was able to pull it up. Emerald Bay currently has 221 existing off-highway parking spaces, and Pope to Baldwin has 921 existing off-highway parking spaces. And as you saw, Emerald Bay can have about 500 cars at its peak on the roadside, and Pope to Baldwin about 330. Mike, here's a question for you. What about, this person asked, what about parking access at Tallac at Spring Creek for backcountry skiing?
As part of the plan, there's a number of parking spaces at the entrance to the Spring Creek tract there that's proposed. So we'll be accommodating a number of folks. I think we're proposing about 25 spaces there for accommodating that winter backcountry skiing need.
This question was, maybe Stephanie, you can handle this one. Or I can handle it. This question is about what environmental analysis will take place as part of the planning process. So this document that we are producing now that we talked about today is a high-level planning framework that will recommend a suggested or recommended list of potential actions that land managers could take. When land managers like the Forest Service or state parks decide to do one of those actions or a similar action or something completely different, that is the point at which the formal environmental analysis will take place. Since this is just a high-level planning framework document, it only recommends, it only sets a roadmap for implementation. The environmental analysis comes in when those specific projects are actually planned and implemented. I don't know, Mike, if you had any other thoughts about the environmental analysis or if that's correct.
I do not right now.
I'm just going through more of the questions. There's a lot of duplicates. This one is the combination of pre-reserved parking and transit being considered. Yes, in those two alternatives, the savvy visitor and the plan ahead visitor, those would be a combination of reservation systems, parking management, and transit. And we would be considering those needs for things like backpackers and hikers that come in and out of the corridor early. This question, have we thought about utilizing volunteer ambassadors to educate visitors about caring for Lake Tahoe and surrounding areas and leave no trace techniques? Yes, ambassadors are definitely something that we have talked about. I know the Forest Service does a lot with Great Basin Institute through their Forest Service sites during the summer and has site hosts that do that. And then I believe, Danielle, was there anything on the 28 corridor that you guys were doing with ambassadors? I feel like I heard something about that.
Yeah, we actually plan to have a parking ambassador out in the parking lots at the trailhead to provide information to the public and, answer questions that they may have. And then, we also regularly do surveys and such, or TRPA does surveys for input along the recreation areas as well.
Thank you. Mike, this would be a question for you. And we have about 5 minutes, so short answer is appropriate for now. This person just asked, what's the connection or status update on the Meeks Bay restoration project?
So we're working with TRPA on hiring a consultant to take the NEPA to its next step. We've already done the initial scoping, and so we're going to be developing a proposed action now with that team. And I would say over the next few months that should be ready and out on the street, but it's essentially taking the same information that we shared during the scoping, which is publicly available on our website, to see what was proposed, and moving that forward to a little more in-depth analysis.
Stephanie, maybe you could help with this, the second part of this question. What are the safety data, pedestrian injuries and deaths within the corridor, especially through Emerald Bay?
Some of the safety imperatives are actually, I think, have been hit upon by some of the questions and comments in terms of the through access for emergency access. One of the things that we find, we've looked at the SWITRS data, which is the data of people actually documenting where a traffic incident has occurred. And we do have rear-end incidents and people that have hit objects along the corridor, especially in Emerald Bay, as people are searching for parking spaces. But one of the things that we find in areas like this is that when we recognize around us that conditions are very congested and lots of pedestrians around, that people naturally slow down, which reduces the number of incidents that are recorded in Caltrans data and in public data by CHP. So we're looking both at the safety incidents in terms of those incidents that have been cataloged, and recognize that some small collisions sometimes aren't captured in that data by CHP, but we're also looking at and have talked to CHP and emergency responders and fire responders in terms of thinking about how we access the corridor for emergencies as well. So that it goes thinking about congestion management along with understanding where helipad access might be in the corridor and lake access to be able to improve some of the safety response opportunities.
Thank you. And we are just about out of time, so I'll finish with one last question. There was 2 questions from one person related to the chambers, visitors authorities, and things like that. You know, I think the education of the visitor and getting the message out there about how to visit Tahoe and not use your car and be a conscious visitor is definitely at the core of a lot of the strategies we're talking about here. And it seems like, and we have engaged and been working with the chambers and resort authorities on this project and engaging them with how they can support it, whether it's through marketing and media, outreach, or direct funding through things like transit occupancy tax. But overall, I know that I probably missed some questions and skipped over what I thought was some duplicates. So if I didn't get to your question, I think we will do something about all these questions and maybe answer the ones we missed and put those on the website somewhere. Know that any of the comments, if I didn't read your specific comment, we are going to have all of these for the record and incorporate your feedback into the plan. Like I said, please stay tuned for an email in the next day or so with the video recording of this webinar and a short survey for you to take afterwards. But thank you all for your time and your thought and consideration in here. And we look forward to keeping you involved as we move through this planning process and release the plan for public consumption and feedback. So thank you very much, and stay